You're watching Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. And now, here's two guys who will be spending most of St. Patrick's Day face down on the wharf in St. Andrews, Evan and Joe.
I'm Joe Ticotsky down in New Haven, Connecticut.
I'm Evan McFarlane here in St. Andrews, where it still tries to figure out what season it is.
And you're watching episode 68 of Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. Evan, have you ever heard the saying, all meat, no filler?
Yes, it's usually my sub at Subway, but it has nothing to do with their TV shows usually.
Oh, well, not this time, because we have two very good interviews. So we'll get right to them. And coming up after the break, we'll get the ball rolling as we chat with a Canadian who's an assistant Division I men's college basketball coach in Texas. You're watching Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV in St. Andrews. Welcome back to Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. March Madness is a college basketball phenomenon that takes over offices, homes, and sports bars across the country for 3 weeks each year. While it's not quite as popular in Canada, its popularity is growing north of the border, and there are numerous Canadian connections. Jamie McNeilly of Toronto is an assistant men's basketball coach at Division I Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas. The Horned Frogs are members of the ultra-competitive Big 12 Conference, and as of this taping, sport an overall record of 19-10, including an upset win earlier in the season over number 1 Houston. Jamie has also coached at Texas A&M, Marquette, and Virginia Tech, as well as with the Canadian men's national teams. So let's chat some college hoops and welcome in Jamie McNeilly. Coach, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Appreciate your time.
Now, you played college basketball at the University of New Orleans, the Privateers. Growing up in Toronto, did you always have a goal of playing D1 basketball in the U.S. and then piggyback with that? And then did you see yourself entering the coaching side?
Yeah, so growing up in Toronto, obviously this is pre-Raptors, and coming from a Caribbean family, I kind of ran track and played soccer. And you played whatever everyone else was playing. I couldn't really afford to play hockey, but whatever sports I could get into, I got into. And then kind of as I grew in high school and basketball was starting to catch on a little bit, and I'd watch guys like Jamal McGlure and other really good players kind of before my time playing high school events, I immediately took to it. So about the 9th grade, I kind of made that decision, hey, I'm going to do what it takes to kind of make it down south and earn a scholarship. And luckily I got down to a JUCO in South Georgia Tech and kind of earned a scholarship to the University of New Orleans from there. But it wasn't by any stretch a childhood dream. I always loved basketball, but I loved all sports. And it's something I kind of just took to in high school, kind of growing up in Scarborough, where basketball kind of was pretty popular when I was a kid. And as far as coaching, when I was overseas playing professionally, I didn't think I was ever going to stop playing. After my first year in Germany, I was one of those kids that kind of just wanted to play forever. And then the opportunity at Marquette came up, and I had a long talk with a few close people in my family, and just kind of said, hey, let me try to make this long-term decision. If I could see myself coaching, never really thought of it until that point. But I think playing another 5-6 years might have helped me a little bit, but I wouldn't have got as ahead as I did starting my coaching career relatively early.
Okay,
Cool.
Evan.
Yeah, and a question I'm going to try to piggyback off of this and take some notes because I coach a little bit here for high school too. But as an assistant coach, and I know you learn something from every head coach you work with under, and you're currently working for a fantastic one in Jamie Dixon at TCU. But what are some of the things you've learned from him?
Yeah, so Dixon's been unbelievable to learn under. Obviously, his resume kind of speaks for itself. He dominated the old Big East at Pitt while I was at Marquette, so kind of witnessed firsthand what his teams did. And when the job came up and I was kind of searching, interviewed a few different places, when Coach Dixon I thought he was halfway serious about hiring me. I mean, I just dropped everything else and all in, and really happy I did so. He understands how to run a program. He understands the nuance behind it. He understands how to connect to each kid's weaknesses and strengths, and amplify the strengths while kind of eliminating the weaknesses. And I've got to see that firsthand with a lot of fringe NBA players and soon to be NBA players. So pretty cool to see. And another coach that kind of pops to mind is Roy Rana, who I coached under for over a decade with the Canadian national team. Another guy that just completely understands how to run a program. And honestly, what coaches like that help me do is kind of spread my wings a little bit. I'm allowed to make mistakes. I'm allowed to try things. I'm allowed to do things in practice with guys individually that like I'm real fortunate to kind of do, because a lot of programs and a lot of head coaches kind of it's this way no matter what. And so just the ability to grow and learn and honestly make mistakes at this level, that's the whole key. Like if you're not trying things and pushing the envelope, then what are you really doing, right? You're just trying to be someone else, or you're trying to fit a mold that you think is there. But honestly, this business it's connections with kids, right? And so that has to be genuine, and each connection has to be a little unique. And I think coaches that kind of understand that and get that have success and longevity.
It's great advice.
That's a really good answer. Thanks.
Yeah, great advice for coaches. All right, I was looking at your schedule from this year, and this season alone, it's amazing. TCU has had 4 1-point games, a 2-point game, an overtime game, and a triple overtime game. Now, besides adding some gray hairs to the beard there, do you and the staff discuss end-of-game strategy amongst each other a lot off the court? And how often do you go over it with players during practice?
Right. We know, being in, like, the Big 12 is the best league in college basketball. Every metric has the Big 12 ahead of kind of every league by a long shot. And we know that. And so we know that it's the best basketball outside of the NBA. And so from day one, we're trying to prepare our guys for hostile environments, for changing situations. We talk about sets, different things to run. Our coaches' text chat is populated literally every morning to every night, just ideas, thoughts. The thing that we try to convey to our guys is these games are very fluid. We just lost up by BYU. Me and Joe were talking about it before we got on the air, and we're up 16 at half, and it's like, guys, at halftime, this game isn't over, far from over. We've been here before. They can catch up. They can win this game. And as it started to happen, we start to try to implement all the things we've kind of talked about and worked on, and see what sticks. Because honestly, most of the time, you don't really know. You have ideas of what they're doing that's working and what you're doing that's not working. But does it connect with the guys? Does it translate on the court? The best deal, the best idea I've seen from Dixon relative to this is just always have our guys ready for changing situations. And so it's not, hey, let's be ready for this 1-point game, or this we're down 2, we're going to run this exact play. No, we're going to have 5 plays in if we're down 2. If we're up 3, we're going to have 3 plays in to get an inbound in case they're doing this or that. And a lot of it is situational intuition. You just kind of have to know what's going on in the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing between college and high school, whereas a lot of times in high school, you'll see a kid saying, I can't believe they shot with 18 seconds left on the shot clock. What were they? And the coach is probably thinking, I was thinking the same thing. Whereas in college, it seems not scripted, but obviously the guys have a higher knowledge level of situations.
Absolutely. Field becomes incredibly important at our level.
Evan.
For sure. If you look at like the growth of basketball overall, if you just watch a D1 game, you hear Canadian players' names pop up like crazy. But maybe can you just talk like the growth of basketball in a hockey-crazed country like Canada? And is it the same as players down there? Is there many Canadians coaching at a D1 level in the States as well?
Yeah, so there's only a handful of us coaching in the States right now. I'd say maybe five or six, could be at 7 now. But it's growing. It's amazing how many calls, emails, and texts I get from young coaches hey, what visa should I be on? What should I be teaching and coaching? And just all the different things that I never really had that mentorship as a young aspiring Canadian coach that I'm trying to provide to as many as possible. And for whoever's hearing this, please feel free, reach out. I'm all about helping Canadians, pushing Canadians forward, because like you're saying, growing up, early 90s, mid 90s, kind of just the sports scene in Canada was obviously hockey dominated, and then whatever games you can catch on the main networks from the South. And so as a kid, you really hung on to those, Sunday Michael Jordan playing on NBC, and because you didn't get the consistency, you didn't get a lot of college games, you didn't get televised high school games. And so it was a little difficult in hindsight because there was no real surety in the mentorship that was given. I didn't know I had to take an SAT and go through a clearinghouse when I was in high school. So I had to do that last minute. And now kids are getting that done in the 9th and 10th grade. But the growth has been phenomenal. And it's kind of cool to see because I think my generation was one of the first generations of guys to really populate the South and really have an idea of the climate down there. And hopefully through the national team, through all the work I've done and other guys that have played with me around the same time as me, we're kind of instilling what it takes to make it down there. Because I mean, basketball in the States, basketball down here it's incredible. It's year round. The talent level is unbelievable, starting from incredibly young ages.
Okay. Couple other quick questions, then we'll let you get out. Favorite road place to play a game?
Yeah. So it's tough because favorite usually means it's hard to play there, and so you don't probably win a lot. And so a couple places come to mind. Obviously, Allen Fieldhouse is pretty cool. The tradition there, you get to walk the hallways before, and you see all the players, and you see Naismith on the wall, you see Wilt, and it's kind of surreal. And I got to actually play there as a player at the University of New Orleans and coach there a few times. So it's kind of cool to revisit there as a player and then now as a coach. I'd say that's a close second to Madison Square Garden. I'm from the old Big East. That's where I started coaching those Marquette teams with Jay Crowder, Jimmy Butler, Junior Cadogan, who's a Canadian. Anytime you walk into the Garden and you get to put on a show for the fans there, I mean, there's nothing cooler. And actually, after all the Big East tournament games and when we would play St. John's, I remember always walking back to the hotel. I didn't want to take the bus. I wanted to be in New York for a while, leaving the Garden, going to my hotel. Just ultra cool experience. All the greats, Ali fought there, all the big performers. You see the banners. Cool experience. Never gets old. I hope I could go back there a bunch more times.
Awesome.
I've been trying to get Evan to come down to catch a UConn game in the Garden with you, but you're right. That place is just phenomenal. The whole setup of it, and it's different. Now, if Coach Dixon said to you, all right, Jamie, next year you can schedule an on-campus road game where we haven't played before, where would it be?
So this is, I think, year 15 at the high major level. So I've been to a lot of places and probably visited there a few times. There's a few places out west because I've typically been in the East I haven't been to. I think a West Coast kind of true road game would kind of be cool. We're getting Arizona and Arizona State in our league next year, so be careful what I ask for. But maybe like a UCLA or just a prominent West Coast team, because I've been extremely fortunate. I've probably been to all the cool arenas, kind of Central and East America. So,
but you have not been to Gamble Pavilion. In Big East, you were, right?
Yeah. Yes, I was. Yeah,
Okay.
I've been there too.
The West Coast. I went to a game at Pauley Pavilion way back against Temple, and it's just a neat. John Wooden was actually there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I had a friend that went to a game at Gonzaga, and that's that's sort of what makes the sport special is the different unique venues there. So, all right. Well, he is Jamie McNeilly, assistant men's basketball coach at TCU in Fort Worth, Texas. One other thing, no Texas accent, huh?
No, the people down here still say they hear a little bit of Caribbean, and I don't know. I got rid of the A's, so I got rid of that a long time ago, but no cowboy hats and boots yet.
Okay. Well, to find out more about the team, you can go online to gofrogs.com. And when this episode first airs, his team will be in the middle of the Big 12 conference tournament. And then on March 17th, we'll be awaiting a bid, hopefully to the NCAA tournament, March Madness. And as long as they don't match up with my UConn Huskies, TCU is definitely my new second favorite team. Coach, thanks so much for taking time out during your busy season to come on the show. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Evan.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well, after the break, Small Town Spotlight heads right down the road from the CHCO studios in St. Andrews to an island that's only accessible for parts of each day. Stay tuned and we'll explain. You're watching Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. Welcome back to Small Town Spotlight on Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. For this episode, we'll take a right-hand turn out of the CHCO studios, past the Picket Fence Motel on the right, then bear right at the Tim Hortons, and take our next right onto Bar Road. When the road ends, you'll see Minister's Island, a National Historic Site of Canada covering 500 acres. The only access to Minister Island is during the hours of low tide when you can drive over a gravel route on the ocean floor. During high tide, that route is covered by the ocean water. The open hours for safe crossing to and from Minister's Island, like the tides, change daily. If you're on the island past open hours, you may have to wait up to 6 hours before safely crossing back to the mainland. It really is an amazing place. And to tell us much more about Minister's Island, let's welcome in tour manager Susan Goertzman. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Now, how long have you been tour manager on Minister's Island?
I've been with the island since 1998. I became the tour manager in 2006, I believe it was. So I've been there for 26 years.
Excellent. Nice. Now, I was reading up, in the late 1800s, Minister's Island was the summer home of William Van Horn. Tell our viewers a little bit about Mr. Van Horn, who he was and how he got there.
Sir William Van Horn was he was an American, actually, born in Illinois. And he lived there until he quit school at 14. He went to work for the railway there. And then in 1881, he was invited to come to Canada to help build the railway, basically to connect British Columbia to the rest of the country. They were not going to join Confederation or the country until they had a fixed link rather than climbing over those mountains. So he was the gentleman responsible for building the railway, joining it from one end of the country to the other.
Now, why did he choose St. Andrews for his summer home?
You've been here, right?
I have. Oh, yeah. Dumb question.
Back in that time, in the late 1800s, a lot of rich Canadians came to, especially Montreal area people, came to St. Andrews for the summer. There was supposedly no hay fever, no bugs. So a lot of them came and they spent the summer at the hotel, at the Algonquin. They'd rent a room or two or whatever for the 2 months of summer and stay. So he was down here for one reason or other and found the island and fell in love with it. And the rest is history.
Yeah, and a good history. Now, what buildings are on the grounds for people that haven't been there before?
Well, originally there were 22 buildings. When he built, it was basically there was nothing except one or two houses belonging to the Andrews family. When he started building, he finished up building 20 buildings. But we have the house, the bathhouse, which is absolutely gorgeous, the garage, the windmill for the water, the gas building for the lighting. There's the barn, which has been renovated, restored, I should say. It's immense and it's a beautiful building. There's the gardener's cottage. There's the minister's house. His house was the first house on the island, and it's actually one of the oldest houses in New Brunswick. It was built in the 1790s. And there's a creamery. So that's pretty well what's left. But before, there would have been slaughterhouse, ice house. There were 2 ice houses, hen house, pigsty, you know, all kinds of building. It was a working farm.
Wow. Now, I had read that in the 1960s, the island was sold to an American company that had plans to turn it into a resort, classic American move. But that idea didn't really go too well, did it?
Well, they're not here anymore. No, they did buy it. They were going to build or make a hunting lodge, but they had to bring up the game because there was nothing on the island at that time. So we've got this 500-acre island that really isn't big enough to hunt. I think it was more, as I say, a rich man's getaway to play cards and do what you do when you play cards.
That's now, because when I first came up to St. Andrews about 10 years ago, a lot of the buildings were sort of in a state of disrepair and not being used totally. When did the restoration of the buildings on the island begin?
Well, restoration has been ongoing since the Van Horn Estates on Minister's Island took over the island back in 2004. They're a local group of people who decided to do something to help. So they've been trying to get funding and grants and going to the government and trying to get money to fix the buildings. There's a lot of work needs to be done, but the barn was done about 6 years ago, and it is amazing.
Yeah, it is quite the building. Now, in addition to the buildings, what else are on the grounds if someone came up to visit? I know I've seen horses there.
And cows. It's a game refuge. So there's about 60 head of white-tailed deer. There's, well, the obvious raccoons, porcupine, skunk or 2, birds, eagles, things like that. We actually, yesterday I was over there and there was 2 eagles, beautiful big eagles sitting on a tree right by the bathhouse. It was absolutely gorgeous. There's also about 20 kilometers of walking trails. So people can come over when we're open. When we're open, they can visit the buildings or they can walk the trails. You can bring a picnic. You can sit and have a picnic. You can, we've got lots of chairs and tables all scattered throughout the island. You can ride your bike around the island. You can't drive around the island. There's just certain roads just to the buildings, but the rest is either walking or driving or biking.
And then they give tours of his main house.
Main house, we have tour guides there that will give you a 10-minute introduction, tells you what you're seeing and whose house it was. And then you're free to wander through with tour guides throughout who are there to help you, to answer your questions, to make sure you're going the right direction type of thing. Same at the barn. You go to the barn and you'll get about a 10-minute introduction on what went on down at that area. And then again, you can go through the barn and there's tour guides with you throughout there.
Okay. Now, if that wasn't all enough, in the summers, the island has a concert series. When did the concert series begin and about how many concerts will be held this year?
Well, the concert started back about 2010. Jamie Steele, local musician, producer here, started them then. We did about 6 a year. This year we've got about 13 of them coming up. So they're all scattered early evening, usually late afternoon, early evening. They're outdoors. It's just beautiful. You sit there, and we're so lucky with our weather that it's just a beautiful hour and a half or so.
Yeah, that is, I'm going to have to get up to one of those this year. Now, as I mentioned in the opening, there's only access to the island during low tide when you can drive or walk across the ocean floor. The question I'm sure everyone asks, and I certainly did the first time I visited, how often do people get stuck on the island by waiting too long to cross back before the tide comes in?
Well, they get stuck on occasion, but that's not during the summer when tour times. When people come to the island We have someone right at the beginning who obviously takes their money, gives them what we call a dash card. You put that on your dash. You turn it in when you leave. When we go, and you are all told exactly when you have to be off the island. We have all these dash cards back when we're leaving, so we know everyone's gone. And people are really good about making sure they get off the island. They don't want to get stuck there, which, yeah, no, they don't want to get stuck there. Once in a while in the fall or winter when we're not there, because you can go over and walk on the island, they don't look at the sign that tells you when you have to be off. Okay. Or they're down the other end of the island walking and don't get back. You've got 6 hours to wait to get back off. The tide is a 6-hour tide.
Not good. Not good.
Not in winter, but in summer it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I had mentioned to you before, and you told me that I certainly wasn't the only one. When I was up there in the winter, I would often get a sandwich and a cup of coffee for lunch and just sit in my car at the edge and look across at the island. And it's just, it's indescribable till you've been there.
It really is. And we promote memberships. If people buy a membership in the summertime when we were open, you could do that every day. You could come right over to the island, go sit at the bathhouse, which is one of the buildings right on the beach area, and have your coffee and donut or your sandwich as many times as you want.
That is great stuff. Well, she is Susan Goertzman, tour manager of Ministers Island in St. Andrews, sort of a hidden gem in a town just filled with hidden gems. And to find out more, you can go online to ministersisland.net. And Susan, thanks so much for being on the show and telling us all about the island.
Oh, thanks for having me.
We're back. And there was a movie one time. What did it say? We're not in Texas anymore? No, not in Kansas anymore. But at least close enough. But you came to your senses, Joe. Nice shirt you're wearing there. Finally repping the right school.
I did. In that last interview, I wore the SJDA sweatshirt during the interview. I love that thing. But I love a CHCO-TV hat even more. You hear that, Patrick Watt? Flo, come on, put in a good word for me and hook up an American with a hat. And while we're on the topic of Patrick Watt and hats, happy recent anniversary to Patrick and his wife, Vicki Hogarth, the power couple of CHCO-TV. They're both great people, and they help make CHCO and St. Andrews such a special place.
Absolutely. Congrats, guys.
Well, that's it for episode 68 of Mc&T Sports Report. I'm Joe in New Haven.
I'm Evan here in St. Andrews.
Thanks to Patrick Watt and Florence Mitchell for producing and editing a show that's now the official Canadian home of March Madness. Sorry, CBS. This is Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV in St. Andrews.